Millionaire returns home to find daughter in handcuffs. What he did next will leave you stunned. Jack Thompson never thought he'd be the kind of man whose daughter would sit in the back of a police cruiser. As he drove past the old diner and the library where he spent afternoons buried in books, an unease crept into the corners of his mind. Today was supposed to be a celebration, his father's 70th birthday, but all he could feel was a tightening in his chest, a shadow of doubt looming over the joy he had anticipated. He pulled into his childhood driveway, an unfamiliar tension settling in as he caught sight of several police cars. Before he even reached the front door, he felt the weight of the world suddenly press down on him. His heart plummeted as he spotted Emily, his college-aged daughter, handcuffed in the back of a cruiser. Her eyes spoke volumes of confusion and fear as she glanced at him, a silent plea that ignited his growing panic. What could have led to this? The officers were harsh in their accusations, framing Emily as a thief, a far cry from the brilliant student he raised. She had always been so kind, so hard-working, the kind of person whose integrity lit up any room she walked into. But standing there, Jack's resolve began to fray as rage laced his disbelief. He was a self-made millionaire, a man of power and influence. Yet here he was, stripped of his authority in the eyes of the community. People whispered just as he could hear the crumbling expectations echo in his mind. His gut twisted as he felt the officers' indifference permeating the air. Wealth hadn't prepared him for this. In an impulse, he decided to hire a prominent attorney from the city, someone capable of shielding them from a stigma that loomed like a dark cloud. He could already anticipate the judgmental looks, the whispers of a father too wealthy to care, and the fear clawed at him, tightening his throat. He had fought so hard for his success, always believing in self-determination. But now he faced a moral crossroads that shattered his beliefs. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Each court appearance was rife with whispers and sidelong glances, and every moment on the stand was a slow, suffocating spiral into despair. He never envisioned that wealth could ever erect such a tall wall between them and their reality. Emily recounted her side of events, the web of misunderstandings and the innocent intentions that fueled the incident. But Jack's resolve wavered as he realized this was not just about his daughter's name. It was a troubling mirror reflecting their lives, distorted by years of privilege and the staggering divide in their town. Could he really expend everything to prove her innocence, knowing it could unravel family secrets and put them all under a harsher microscope? The tension mounted as he recognized the decision ahead, one that could fracture or fortify everything they had built together. How far would he go in the fight for Emily's dignity? What would he be prepared to lose in the pursuit of justice that felt more elusive with every fleeting moment? The courtroom felt like a battleground, and Jack had no idea who the real enemy was anymore. The following days felt like a relentless tide, pulling Jack deeper into a sea of uncertainty. Each court session wore on his spirit, dragging him further from the confident businessman he once was. The atmosphere inside the courthouse was suffocating, as if every pair of eyes was holding him accountable for the actions of his daughter. This was supposed to be a fight for Emily's dignity, yet Jack discovered that it was turning into a battle for his soul. As the attorney he had hired rambled through legal jargon, Jack's mind wandered, contemplating the depths of his choices. Wealth allowed him to navigate life in a way most would envy, but now it felt like a cage. He wrestled with the moral ambiguity of throwing money at a problem, unsure if it would shield Emily or draw more ire from the community. One late evening, huddled by an old desk in his childhood home, Jack evaluated the lives they had led. Years of striving for success had sharpened his focus on external outcomes rather than internal growth. The wall between him and his daughter had grown over the years, The riches that paved their lifestyle also built a fortress of misunderstanding. How many times had he prioritized work over meaningful conversations? The thought gnawed at him, and he felt an overwhelming urge to reach out and connect with Emily, to peel away the layers of assumption and find out who she truly was. As the sun dipped below the horizon, he picked up his phone and dialed her attorney. "I want to talk to her. I want to understand," he said firmly, surprising himself with his own conviction. It was time to stand not just as her father, but as her ally. The path forward would not solely rely on legal defenses. It required rebuilding trust and connection. Arrangements were made for a meeting at the detention center. When Emily walked into the room, a wave of relief washed over Jack. Briefly, the shackles and the surrounding bureaucracy faded, leaving just the two of them. Her eyes were the same, but the shadows beneath spoke of anxiety and conflict. He noticed how she fidgeted, pulling at the sleeves of her beige jumpsuit. "Dad," she breathed, her voice barely audible, yet it held so much weight. "I'm here. Let's talk." What followed was a cathartic exchange. Emily recounted the truth of the situation, the desperate measures she thought were necessary for a friend who had led her astray. As she spoke, Jack listened intently, absorbing every detail. He discovered hidden layers of his daughter's struggles, the pressures of college, the burden of expectations, and the fear of failure that had driven her to make impulsive decisions. In that raw moment, Jack felt a shift within himself. He realized that this wasn't only about proving her innocent in the eyes of the law. It was about understanding, empathy, and redemption. As they delved into difficult conversations, Jack also touched upon his own life and the skewed values that had guided him. They weren't alone in this mess. The fractured pieces of their lives were intertwined, and healing would require effort from both sides. When their meeting concluded, a newfound resolution invigorated Jack. He exited the facility with a clear intention. He would not only fight for Emily's name, but also for a chance to reconnect, to weave the threads of their father-daughter bond tighter, rather than let them unravel. Yet, as he drove home, doubt crept back in. How would he confront the community, the whispers that overshadowed them? The decision loomed ahead, echoing with the risk of exposing deeper truths that could fracture their lives even further. Jack gripped the steering wheel, knowing the time had come to face the criticism not only as a father, but as a flawed man seeking redemption. What strands of the past would he need to untangle to move forward? What revelations about himself still lay buried, waiting to be unearthed? Jack awoke the next morning feeling the weight of the world heavier than ever. The sunlight filtering through the curtains felt more like an indictment than a blessing, illuminating the void that lay within him. He had made strides during his conversation with Emily, yet the uncertainties ahead weighed on his shoulders. He needed a plan, a way not just to assist Emily, but to transform himself to be the father she needed. Resolving to stop merely reacting and start proactively confronting his situation, Jack began drafting a strategy. As he sat at the breakfast table, he bit into a piece of toast, but his mind dismissed its flavor. Instead, he focused on the patterns that had led him to this point. The disconnection from Emily, the obsessive focus on success, and the fear that had fenced them both in. First, he needed to redefine what success meant not just for himself, but also for Emily. Instead of dollar signs and achievements, it had to become about emotional well-being and strong relationships. He would reframe his role from financier to supporter, fortifying Emily's foundations instead of placing her on a pedestal. He picked up his phone and made a call, this time to a family therapist he had researched. Gregarious in nature and skilled in navigating troubled waters, the therapist was known for his candid but compassionate approach. When Jack explained his family's crisis, he felt lighter, almost hopeful, for the first time. Setting an appointment for the following week, he hung up and allowed himself to craft a vision. Family dinners filled with honest conversations, disrupted by laughter and vulnerability. Next, he turned his focus to the community, Jack had spent too long hiding behind the fortress, built by wealth. After years of taking refuge behind his money, it was time to stand firm and face the whispers. He decided to utilize his influence to share Emily's story, not only to defend her actions, but to also foster understanding. With the right approach, maybe he could raise awareness about the pressures young adults face. Perhaps, too, his own experiences could serve as lessons, rather than mask their pain. Fueled by a renewed sense of purpose, he worked tirelessly on a draft to submit to the local newspaper, detailing his journey as a father navigating the misunderstanding of modern youth. His fingers flew over the keyboard. Each word carried weight, the weight of hard-earned wisdom, vulnerability, and a plea for empathy. As he pressed send, an appreciation for his vulnerability washed over him. He found solace in the notion that exposing his flaws might lead to healing, not only for Emily, but for himself. Anger and bitterness had drawn the two of them apart. Perhaps sharing their struggle would stitch them closer together. Yet, in the back of his mind, lingered the nagging thought that he wouldn't emerge unscathed. The community might react with disdain. Friends could distance themselves. Jack felt the pulse of fear rise, battling against the resolve he had finally harnessed. Before he could succumb to the negative possibilities, he redirected his energy into planning for Emily's next court session. He continued his research, learning about the accumulated struggles of individuals in similar situations, reaching out to others who had weathered the storm. Their experiences fueled his understanding and fortified his resolve. Yet the thought struck him. Would Emily accept the new version of him he was striving to be? As he prepared his notes for the next attorney meeting, Jack's thoughts spiraled. What if he failed to understand the intricacies of her world? Knowing he couldn't do it alone, he contemplated reaching out to Emily again, this time not just as a conversation, but to invite her input on their shared journey. With every intention to foster open dialogue and connection, a new anxiety surfaced. What if she didn't want to discuss things? What if rebuilding wasn't as simple as he envisioned? His heart raced as he considered the fragility of this new path he was forging. As he sat in the quiet of his office, surrounded by reminders of the life he had built, but desperately wanted to change, he realized the most dangerous battles aren't fought in courtrooms or against public opinion, but within the mind. With the stakes escalating, how far would he go to reclaim not only his daughter's future, but also his own identity? Jack's phone buzzed, pulling him from his reverie. It was an alert, an email notification from the newspaper confirming receipt of his article. He stared at the screen, his heart racing. Had he truly thrown his vulnerabilities into the void, unearthing himself for the world to scrutinize? It was as if he had pulled a ripcord, sending his thoughts into a chaotic freefall. Taking a deep breath, he reminded himself why he had sent that piece. It was about Emily, his daughter, his priority, a symbol of his hope for building a bridge back to her. But as the initial euphoria of sharing his story faded, doubt crept back in. Was this really the path to healing or just a reckless gamble? Determined to confront his fears head-on, Jack scheduled an evening to sit down with Emily. They had to talk openly, to share and mend. The thought of seeing her again thrilled and terrified him in equal measure. Would she see the man he was striving to become, or merely the ghost of his past? The day drifted by in a fog of anticipation and anxiety. When Emily finally arrived home, he noticed the familiar distance in her eyes. Each interaction felt strained, charged with unspoken words and murky feelings. "Hey, Dad," she said, avoiding his gaze as she dropped her bag. "Emily, can we talk?" His voice felt thick, weighted with urgency but layered with caution. She hesitated, glancing toward the window. "Is it about the article?" "Yes, among other things." He paused, trying to formulate his next words carefully. "I wanted to share what I've learned and hear your thoughts." "Honestly, I don't want to talk about it," she replied, her posture rigid. The rejection stung, but Jack pressed on, unwilling to retreat. I need you to know that I am trying to understand. I've spent so much time focusing on what I thought success meant. I lost sight of what you need from me. I'm here to support you, not to judge you. Emily finally turned to look at him, her expression unreadable. It's hard to just forget everything, Dad. You can't fix this with words or articles. It's deeper than that. I know it is, but I want to learn, and I want you to be involved in this process. I can't do this alone. Please, let's just talk, even if it's hard. A silence lingered between them, but he could see the flicker of hope behind her hesitation. Maybe it would take time, but Jack was committed to dismantling the walls he had built, brick by painstaking brick. Okay, but you have to promise something, she said slowly, a cautious hint of vulnerability edging into her tone. Anything, he replied earnestly. Promise you won't try to take control of everything. Just let me express myself, even if it's messy. I promise, he said, the weight of his sincerity accompanying the words. There was something monumental in that moment, a promise of partnership rather than a power struggle. Jack realized a significant shift had occurred. His preconceived notions of fatherhood and leadership were beginning to evolve. By inviting Emily into this journey, he acknowledged her agency, her right to express her feelings without fear of judgment. As they talked, he listened not just to her words, but to the underlying fears, frustrations, and dreams that colored her experiences. Each revelation felt like pulling another thread, unraveling the tapestry of misunderstanding that had silenced their bond. But beneath the surface of their breakthrough, uncertainty simmered. Would this open dialogue lead to genuine healing, or would old wounds resurface, threatening to sever their fragile connection? With the stakes raised and new emotions swirling, Jack now faced a critical decision. How far would he go to truly understand Emily, to build a bridge that might withstand the storms of their past? As he glanced at her, realizing how little he truly knew about her world, he felt the need for further revelations. What would happen next as their raw truths surfaced more fiercely? And could they withstand the storm brewing on the horizon? Jack struggled to push past the weight of uncertainty. Their conversation had left him with more questions than answers, provoking a quiet fear that gnawed at him. He sat at the kitchen table, bearing witness to the distance that still lay between them, like an impassable chasm. He considered what he knew about Emily and realized how little it truly was. He'd spent years chasing his version of success, blind to the fact that Emily had grown up in his absence. The sad irony struck him. In his pursuit of achievement, he had forsaken the very relationships that defined his life. Over the next few days, he made it a point to listen more and to talk less, shifting from the role of an authoritative father to that of a humble learner. Fueled by a newfound determination, Jack began to see the world through her eyes. He scrolled through her social media, discovering notes she had written about her dreams and interests, art being at the top of the list. She had posted images of her sketches, vibrant and full of emotion. His heart sank slightly. He had overlooked her passion. One evening, emboldened by his desire to connect, Jack gathered the courage to approach her about it. Emily, I saw some of your artwork online. You're incredibly talented. She raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident on her face. Thanks, but it's just doodling. No, it's more than that. I can see how much it means to you. Have you ever thought about pursuing it seriously? I don't know, she said, the defensiveness creeping back in. It's not like I have a chance at making it big or anything. It's just a hobby. Jack felt a pang of frustration, but chose patience. But what if it led to something? You don't have to chase the same path that I did. What do you really want, Emily? Pursuing that could be your own success. Her expression shifted between defiance and contemplation. You sound just like my guidance counselor, she retorted, but the air was less charged. That's not what I mean, he replied. I'm not trying to steer you in a certain direction. I just want you to feel empowered to make your own choices. In her silence, he noted a hint of vulnerability creeping back into her expression, Jack made a decision. He would not push her. Instead, he invited her out to a local art gallery over the weekend, a chance for her to explore not just the art of others, but her own feelings about expression. On the day of their outing, anticipation intertwined with anxiety. As they arrived, Emily's hesitance turned to curiosity, and Jack felt a glimmer of hope. They wandered through the vibrant rooms filled with splashes of color and emotion. As a piece caught her eyes, he saw her step closer, mesmerized by the moment. "Do you see that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "The way that color bursts off the canvas? It tells a story." Jack nodded, sensing the window of connection opening wider. "It's beautiful." He paused to consider his next words carefully. "Just like you, Em." She turned sharply, surprise written across her face. "You really think so?" "I know so," he replied, feeling the warmth of sincerity welling within him. "And I believe you have stories to tell." The faintest hint of a smile crossed her lips, signaling a shift, however small. Their exchange, though tentative, carved away at the walls that had separated them for so long. But beneath this blossoming connection, Jack's thoughts roiled with a darker awareness. What would he do if she chose a path he couldn't understand? The potential for conflict loomed large if her choices contradicted the ideals he had clung to for so long. He felt an insatiable urge rising within him, to confront this fear, to prepare for whatever revelation lay ahead. As the gallery visit came to a close, he noticed an unfinished mural looming in a corner, its potential unfulfilled, begging the world for completion. Something about it resonated deeply with him. It felt like an unspoken promise for both himself and Emily. As they exited the gallery, an unexpected thought struck Jack. What if he were to join her in redefining what success meant? What if creating alongside her could heal them both? That glimmer faded into uncertainty as they walked home, but the urge lingered, a quest for a deeper understanding of not just Emily, but of himself. The moment felt profound, and Jack could sense that a new chapter in their relationship was just beginning. He had to confront the dichotomy between his hopes and the shadows of doubt, and as he prepared to navigate this uncertain terrain, one question loomed large. Could he embrace a new vision of success without losing himself in the process? Jack awoke the next morning, a slow, uneasy energy clinging to him like morning fog. He couldn't shake the thought of the mural, a reflection of both his and Emily's lives, an unfinished piece waiting for a layer of meaning, a coating of experience to bring it to life. As he made his morning coffee, he pondered how they could start anew. This moment felt like a thin sliver of the future glinting through the chaos of their past. His thoughts drifted. Despite his efforts to focus on Emily, a troubling specter loomed over him. What if, in his quest to redefine success, he simply floundered into chaos? The familiar urge to control the narrative nagged at him. After all, he had spent years mastering his career. But perhaps that control had stifled his ability to connect with his daughter, an observation that had begun shifting his perspective in profound ways. Later that day, Jack retrieved his sketchbook from the attic, a relic from his younger years. Dust settled on its cover, remnants of forgotten dreams. He opened it cautiously, revealing half-finished designs, plans for a life less ordinary. With a sudden clarity, he recognized how art had always been interwoven with his aspirations. Yet it had become just another to-do list in the midst of his corporate success. He began to draw again, channeling his reflections on fatherhood and the uncertain path ahead. When he picked Emily up from school, he couldn't help but notice the way her laughter punctuated the air, a lightness that seemed to exist apart from their previous tension. He decided to share his sketches with her, having no idea how she would respond. It felt either incredibly vulnerable or astonishingly brave. He hadn't quite decided which. "Hey, Em," he began, gathering his courage. "I've been working on a few sketches." He pulled the notebook from his backpack and offered it to her. Emily flipped through the pages, surprise etched on her face. "You still draw?" she asked, her tone somewhere between disbelief and intrigue. It's been a while, he admitted, flinching at the truth of his words. I guess I forgot how much I enjoyed it. You used to draw a lot, she said. I remember. You had those weird animals and landscapes. The hint of nostalgia in her voice unlocked something inside Jack. Yeah, I did. But I've let work get in the way. Today, I want to change that. Maybe we could sketch together? Her skepticism returned, but he could see a flicker of curiosity. You really want to draw with me? Absolutely, he replied, dancing between hope and trepidation. I think it could be good for both of us, like starting a new mural of our own. A small smile whispered across Emily's face, and he found himself reveling in this moment of connection. They settled at the kitchen table, a contrast to the years spent in silence. As the pencil danced on the paper, they spoke not just of art, but of dreams, anxieties, and forgiveness. Jack felt pieces of the past loosen their grip, allowing for a new dialogue to flourish. Suddenly, as if a dam had burst, Emily confessed, I've always wanted to visit art school, but I didn't know how to tell you. I thought you'd think it was stupid. Jack paused. The weight of her words settled over him like a heavy blanket. It's not stupid, Em. It's brave. And I want to support you, in whatever you decide. It might be different from what I envisioned, but it's your dream, not mine. Their conversation evolved into laughter, the kitchen filled with the scent of possibility, the air around them transforming little by little. But the specter of uncertainty still lingered at the edges, reminding him of the fear that lay dormant within. Could he genuinely support her journey into a world he had yet to understand? The thought clawed at him, mingling with a sense of liberation. As their sketches took shape, an alarming thought wrapped itself around his mind. What if her aspirations led her away from him entirely? The fear of isolation threatened to drown out the joy emerging from their shared creativity. The session ended, but somehow it felt like only the beginning. As Emily smiled and gathered her artwork, a spark ignited in Jack's chest. He sensed both exhilaration and dread. This was a transformative crossroads for them both. The next step loomed ahead, as daunting as it was necessary. Jack realized that this journey of exploration would warrant not just his support, but a profound shift within himself as well. Tomorrow, he would have to confront the complexities of navigating a world he feared yet desired to embrace. What if, instead of pushing her away, he leaned into the uncertainty of her dreams? The thought daunted him, but it also ignited an exhilarating thrill, and as the night deepened, Jack grappled with that truth. In redefining success, perhaps the scariest move of all would be allowing Emily to lead the way. Would he have the courage to follow her into the unknown? Jack woke early the next day, the sun filtering through the curtains with an intense brightness, an unwanted reminder of the changes he had set in motion. Thoughts of Emily and their drawing session wrapped around him, warming him, but also igniting a fresh sense of urgency. He felt both exhilarated and anxious as he stood in the kitchen preparing breakfast. The usual routine felt heavier this morning, burdened by unspoken complexities. After the last slice of toast popped up, he took a moment to breathe, gathering the resolve he would need for the day ahead. Today, he planned to visit a local art studio that Emily mentioned, a place she dreamed of attending. Stripped of its corporate sheen, the art world seemed alien but magnetic, promising the vibrancy he craved in his life. Yet the fear of not being able to relate to Emily in this new context made his chest tighten. He grabbed his sketchbook, the pages still filled with the hope of possibilities, and placed it in his bag. Perhaps sharing this part of himself, his love for drawing, would strengthen the bond he had long neglected. Jack walked to the car, each step echoing both excitement and anxiety. He didn't just want to be a passive observer in Emily's creative journey. He needed to be involved, to validate her aspirations. Arriving at the studio, the first thing he sensed was a chaotic energy brimming with potential. Color was everywhere, splashing across walls and canvases, while laughter and chatter spilled from small groups of artists engaged in discussions about technique and inspiration. Jack felt out of place but drew in a deep breath, reminding himself that this was about Emily, not him. As he stepped inside, a wave of uncertainty crested. He scanned the room, searching for the boundary between his instinct to control and the desire to be present. Suddenly, a figure approached him, an instructor with a welcoming smile. "Hi there. Are you interested in the workshops?" she asked. Jack squirmed slightly, considering the extent of his intent. "Actually, I'm here for my daughter. She's interested in art school," he said, his voice betraying a touch of vulnerability. The instructor's eyes brightened. "That's wonderful. We're always looking for young talent. Art is a language that connects us all." This comment caused Jack's heart to race. He had spent years in a language of numbers and data, a world where connection was secondary and efficiency was king. How could he reconcile that with the organic, unpredictable nature of art that his daughter aspired to embrace? As if reading his mind, the instructor gestured toward a canvas where several students were gathered. Why not engage with them? The creative journey is often about collaboration and dialogue. Jack hesitated, his mind conflicting with his intuition. Move beyond the comfortable walls of corporate familiarity and enter a realm of creativity that felt both intimidating and liberating. He felt himself draw back, considering retreat. In that moment, however, he caught sight of Emily standing in the corner, observing, sketchbook in hand. She glanced up, her expression a mix of eagerness and uncertainty, and it struck him that retreat was not an option. This could be his invitation to not only understand her aspirations but to align with them. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward. The instructor followed his gaze. "Is that your daughter? Encouraging artists, young or old, is a great way to break out of your comfort zone." Jack wavered but felt the weight of Emily's gaze on him. Wouldn't she want to see her father embrace the strange world she loved? That simple notion drove him into action. He approached the group of students, the instructor introducing him. "Hey, everyone," Jack began, his voice steadying. "I don't know much about this, but I'd like to learn." The words hung in the air, acknowledging the start of a journey, one that would require effort and honesty, and possibly vulnerability from both him and his daughter. As they started, paint and laughter surrounded him, and he found himself caught between playfulness and the seriousness of self-discovery. The experience was overwhelming, but also light. With every stroke on the canvas, Jack sensed the boundaries of his past dissolving, replaced with a clarity of intention. But as the instructor encouraged Jack to explore more of what he felt, an unsettling thought crept in again. What if he wasn't enough to support Emily? What if, in fully investing himself in this journey, he revealed his own limitations, the ones he had spent a lifetime carefully concealing? As the day began winding down, he spotted Emily sketching nearby, completely immersed in her work. A twinge of doubt crept back in. What if her dreams could outpace his efforts? He stood at a precipice, feeling both exhilarated and paralyzed by the unknown. Jack would have to confront not only the art world, but also the fears clawing at him. What if she excelled beyond him? The fear of inadequacy loomed large, threatening to overshadow the joy of their connection. In that overwhelming moment, Jack made a crucial decision. Instead of yielding to fear, he would allow himself to grow. He took a step toward his daughter, knowing the next challenge would demand courage beyond what he had ever shown. Tomorrow would test not just their bond, but his very identity. Would he be willing to embrace the unknown, even if it threatened everything he once defined as success? The answer lingered, tantalizing yet terrifying, like a blank canvas awaiting its first strokes. Jack woke the next morning with a renewed sense of purpose drumming in his veins. The chaos of the art studio lingered in his mind, but it felt different now, more like a spark than a shadow. He was no longer simply the corporate man steering his life down a well-worn track. He had stepped into a realm vibrant with potential. Gearing himself up for the day ahead, he found an unfamiliar excitement blending with his usual apprehension. Breakfast was a blur of motions. Toast popped up, coffee brewed, but his mind was elsewhere, replaying fragments of yesterday. Emily sketching, the encouragement of the instructor, the laughter of young artists. The realization struck him. This wasn't simply about sustaining Emily's dreams. This was about forging a bond stronger than the one they had, one that could breathe life into both of their aspirations. Stepping out of the kitchen, he noticed the sketchbook he had taken to the studio lying on the table. It seemed so small, yet so profound today. He picked it up, thumbing through the pages filled with his amateur attempts at capturing the world around him. Each doodle was a whispered declaration of his willingness to be vulnerable, to confront the doubt that had stifled him for so long. With a new energy coursing through him, Jack made a decision. He would begin not just to learn, but to explore this world alongside Emily, because their relationship couldn't merely survive. It needed to flourish. As he drove toward the studio later that day, the familiar streets transformed before him. They morphed into paths leading to uncharted territories, places where the echoes of his past were slowly giving way to an enticing potential for growth. The art studio buzzed with the same chaotic energy, but this time it felt inviting instead of jarring. Entering the studio, Jack felt a sense of belonging wash over him. The seeping colors and laughter welcomed him like an embrace. Instinctively, he drifted toward the group where he had painted the day before. Today, the instructor was demonstrating blending techniques. As he stepped closer, she caught his eye and motioned him to join. "Jack, good to see you again. Ready to dive deeper?" she asked, her enthusiasm clear. The sincerity of her question resonated inside him. He wasn't just diving into art. He was diving into a new chapter of his life. He nodded, the words spilling out before he had a chance to overthink them. "Yes, I want to really understand this process, not just for Emily, but for myself." "Great. Art is all about discovery," she said, guiding him toward a palette. As he squeezed the paint tubes and watched them squirt vibrant colors onto his palette, he felt an exhilarating jolt of energy. Each color represented not only the creativity he was beginning to access, but also the emotions he had suppressed for years. With every brush stroke, he felt the barriers around his heart begin to loosen, but the doubts gnawed at him, each stroke battling the fear of inadequacy that threatened to rise. What if this wasn't enough? What if he could never fully grasp the art that exhilarated Emily? The ghost of his old self clawed from the back of his mind, whispering of past failures. But Jack pushed back, focusing on the moment. It was more than just art. It was about connection. Around him, the other students, young, vibrant, innovative, they loaded their canvases with energy that was palpable. Jack marveled at their ease, their confidence, and for a moment, he could only watch, a participant who felt foreign in this realm. But then he caught sight of Emily again. Her focus, her fierce concentration on her artwork, reminded him why he was here. She was not just engaged in crafting her dreams, she was inviting him to participate in them. He turned his attention inward, letting the paint flow without fear of judgment. With each swirl and curve, Jack confronted his past, an oppressive attempt to control everything, and began embracing a new path. A smile crept into his expression, and for the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful, as if shedding layers of doubt and embracing something vibrantly alive. Yet as Jack layered colors, a new anxiety settled in. Was this merely a step toward understanding Emily? Or was it the beginning of a journey that would change him irrevocably? The brush in his hand felt heavier, holding the weight of his fears mixed with his determination. This rapidly unfolding connection with art and with Emily could force him to confront more than just his self-doubt. It could unveil cracks in the facade he'd carefully built over the years. As Jack leaned in closer to his canvas, a powerful notion struck him. a realization that laid the groundwork for his next challenge. Tomorrow, he would share his feelings with Emily, revealing the transformative journey he had embarked upon and confronting the fear that had long held him captive. But would she accept his attempts to redefine their relationship, or would his honesty push them further apart? The canvas awaited his next stroke, his heart racing at the thought of what that meant for both of them. As the light filtered through the canvas, painting Jack's workspace in warm hues, the urgency of his decision loomed over him like a thundercloud. He had committed to sharing the depth of his transformative experience with Emily, but a persistent nagging uncertainty wormed its way into his mind. How would she react? Would she understand the journey he was embarking upon? Jack pored over the swirls of color he had created, seeing them not just on the canvas, but as reflections of his own chaotic emotions: hope, anxiety, exhilaration, and fear. His fingers brushed against the textured surface, and it hit him. Art was a language of vulnerability. He wouldn't just reveal his soul through words, he could paint his truth as well. With fresh resolve, Jack began outlining a new scene on his canvas. Each brushstroke became a statement, an exploration of his feelings, echoing the complexities within their relationship. As he depicted their shared moments, Emily sketching, her laughter echoing around him, he realized he wasn't merely expressing himself. He was forging a bridge between their two worlds. Each layer of paint brought new intensity, a whisper of courage growing in his spirit. In a place where he once felt lost, Jack now discovered brilliance. Yet the imminence of their conversation crushed upon him, doubling the urgency of his artistic endeavor. The canvas held so much promise, but could it translate into reality? Jack's eyes roamed around the studio, absorbing the energy radiating from his peers. Many were lost in vibrant dialogues with their artworks, chatting excitedly about their processes and ambitions, seemingly united in their pursuit. He envied their familial loyalty to creativity and felt smothered by his inherent corporate conscientiousness. The art of life demanded rawness, while his past tethered him to calculated decisions. Suddenly, he felt the instructor's presence near him, her curious gaze sweeping over his work. "This is wonderful, Jack. You're beginning to find your voice," she exclaimed, genuine admiration igniting his confidence. But her words also sparked an inner rebellion. He questioned if he had truly found his voice, or if he was still tiptoeing along the edges of discovery. "Thank you." He hesitated, the weight of vulnerability heavy in the air. "I want to take this all in, but I also feel pressed to be honest with Emily about everything I'm experiencing. What if sharing my feelings alienates her?" "You're expressing that which lies within. Honesty is seldom met with rejection from those who truly care. Think of it as another form of art. Give it life and energy," she replied, an artist to an artist. Her encouragement faded, but left behind a spark. Plunging back into colors, Jack felt both exhilarated by the notion of being alive in their insecurities and terrified of the implications. He was ready to pin down his fears on the canvas to show Emily, just as he now intended to face the conversation head-on. After all, he pondered, would embracing his authentic self truly shift their relationship? He took a deep breath and turned away from the canvas momentarily, noting Emily in her rhythm, lost in her artistic world. Was he brave enough to pull her into his chaos, merging it with hers, creating something beautiful, even if it meant the possibility of rejection? The silence of the studio pressed against him as Jack stood still, digesting this vital moment of honesty that felt like a clarion call for action. Did he dare reveal his newfound self? Would sharing his fears and aspirations peel back the layers of his past? The prospect of impending vulnerability rose before him, an emotional storm brewing with certainty. He leaned back into his colors, readying for tomorrow, a new dawn of dialogue emerging with Emily. But as he painted, eyes sweeping the studio once more, a lingering doubt persisted like an unsettling shadow. Could vulnerability shatter the very foundations he was trying to build? The unfinished canvas cried out for his next stroke, holding the promise of transformation and the anxiety of the unknown yet to unfold. The next morning stirred Jack awake with the weight of purpose pressing on his chest. He had spent nearly every waking moment contemplating how to convey his transformation to Emily. Curiosity, fear, excitement, and anticipation swirled together like the colors on his palette. The day loomed before him, heavy with potential, yet threading it with tension. Today was not only about sharing his journey, it was about forging a path anew. As he stood in the kitchen preparing breakfast, the aromas wafted through the air like reminders of the life he sought to redefine. He grabbed his sketchbook, flipping through its pages, each one a testament to the newfound enthusiasm he had derived from connecting with Emily. This time, the lines he drew weren't calculated. They were instinctive and genuine, reflections of their shared experiences, heartfelt wishes, and the hope that lay ahead. Driving over to the art studio later, Jack felt a burgeoning sense of clarity. He envisioned not just sitting across the table from Emily, but standing together at the precipice of something monumental, an exploration into their emotions and vulnerabilities. He yearned to be the father she deserved, one who embraced her aspirations and supported her dreams without judgment. Upon arriving at the studio, he was greeted by a burst of energy from fellow artists. The environment was alive with creativity, the chatter a harmonious blend of expression and exploration. He caught sight of Emily, immersed in her artwork, her brow furrowed in concentration. She exuded passion. It ignited something within him. Gathering every ounce of courage, he stepped toward her, feeling as if he was crossing a threshold into uncharted territory. "Hey, Em," he called, trying to keep his voice steady. "Dad." "Hey," she replied, her surprise tinged with a hint of apprehension. "I've been working on something that I want to share with you. Do you have a moment?" His heart raced, each word feeling like a delicate thread weaving between them. "Sure," she answered, but he could see her uncertainty lingering. Without hesitation, Jack opened his sketchbook to the pages filled with their shared moments. The sketches of her immersed in creation, the art gallery visit, the laughter they had shared over the weekend. "I want you to see what I've been feeling. These sketches, they represent not just my journey, but the way I want to be here for you." As he pointed to each piece, he explained the layers of emotion that flowed through him during the creative process. The joy of seeing her thrive, the fear of being inadequate, and a heartfelt recognition that her dreams didn't just belong to her. They became a part of him as well. Emily studied the pages carefully, her expression shifting from surprise to contemplation. "You really put a lot of thought into this," she said, her voice softening. Though her words were laden with hesitation, Jack sensed the opportunity for connection, the walls of distance slowly crumbling. "And what I really want to tell you is that I realize how disconnected I've been. I want to support your dream, Em, whatever that looks like for you. I don't want to stifle what makes you, you." A pause hung in the air, irritating yet electric. Jack's heart thudded in his chest as he awaited her response, fearing everything hinged upon this one moment. "I appreciate that, Dad," she replied, her tone reflective. "But I worry that you want me to pursue something just because I'm your daughter. What if I fail?" Jack shook his head, feeling a surge of urgency. "What if you fly? You have your own story, and I want you to own it without feeling like you have to reach my version of success." The tension shifted, morphing into a shared vulnerability. He could feel a shift in Emily, a layer of apprehension peeling away. "I've always felt like your expectations loomed over me, that I had to be the perfect daughter," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "That wasn't my intention," he said earnestly. "I've realized I've been so focused on the life I wanted for us that I lost sight of what you want for yourself. It's tied to my struggles, and I want to change the narrative. Please, let's redefine success together." Emily took a deep breath, and Jack saw uncertainty mixed with hope in her eyes. "Okay, "I'll try to be more open about my passions," she stated, a hint of determination threading her tone. "And I want you to keep exploring your art, too." In that moment, an unspoken agreement passed between them. A commitment to grow, to explore paths less traveled together, and to embrace the messy, vibrant art of living authentically. As they engaged in a burst of creativity, laughter punctuated their dialogue, the joy washing over the remnants of fear, creating a tapestry rich with trust and understanding. Jack witnessed his daughter shed the burden of expectation and start to reveal her true self, and it felt like the sweetest victory. Before they parted, Jack realized that although the journey ahead would be fraught with unpredictable twists, they had dismantled the barriers of misunderstanding. Their connection had deepened, and in opening himself up, he had not only revealed his artistic voice but also affirmed his role as an ally for Emily. Jack left the studio that day with an overwhelming sense of clarity. He had achieved more than he had ever thought possible, not just by nurturing Emily's dreams, but by allowing vulnerability to flourish within himself. As the sun set, casting the world in a golden glow, he knew that they were no longer defined by their struggles. They were defined by their commitment to explore the unknown together. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, revelations, and perhaps even more healing, but today marked a significant milestone in their journey. A moment of true connection, where hearts were laid bare, and aspirations were no longer solitary but shared. Now was the time for action, not just in lifting Emily up, but in paving the way for his creation, embracing the man he had become, and confidently stepping into a partnership marked by respect, encouragement, and unconditional love. This was the moment for Jack. A new chapter awaited. The canvas had finally filled with colors he could not have imagined before. He was ready to embrace whatever came next. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Now is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.